I never thought my own family would take the painful step of excluding me from Christmas celebrations. Just days before the cherished date, I called my parents to confirm my arrival time. On the other end, I was met with my father's abrupt, almost businesslike voice. "Ethan, it would be better if you stayed home this year," he stated. At first, I took it as a bad joke. Laughing nervously, I asked, "What do you mean? It's Christmas." His answer pierced my heart, inflicting a pain I'd never experienced from him. "Your sister is planning to introduce her fiancé to the family. She's strongly against you being there. In her opinion, your humble, minimum-wage job might be an embarrassment to her in his eyes." Stunned, I froze with the phone to my ear, refusing to believe what I'd heard. My father's words echoed in my head like hammer blows, driving nails into my chest. My own sister, the girl I'd always protected, now considered my job, my life, to be beneath her. And my father, to my greatest sorrow, shared her opinion. I wanted to object, to ask how he could do this, how he could prioritize outward appearances over his own son. But instead, I felt the air leave my lungs and could only whisper, "I understand." He didn't try to comfort me, didn't take back his words. He just hung up. I sat in silence for a long time, the Christmas lights in my apartment blurring through a haze of tears. For years, I'd felt like a disappointment to my family, the one who didn't go to a prestigious university, who chose to work with his hands instead of wearing an expensive suit. But this was different. This wasn't just disappointment, it was outright rejection. I tried to tell myself to let it go, move on, spend the holiday alone. But 3 days later, something completely unexpected happened. The man my sister was so desperate to impress, the man she believed should look down on me, unexpectedly showed up at my auto shop, dressed in my work uniform, working under my supervision. It was from that moment that everything began to change rapidly. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in my sister's shadow. Samantha, or Sam as everyone called her, was the family's true golden child. She always got excellent grades, went to a prestigious college, and landed a job at a well-known marketing firm in the city. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthday, my parents showered her with praise and compliments. "Look at Sam," my father would say, raising his glass. "She's going to achieve great things." My mother would nod proudly, her eyes shining as if Sam had already conquered the world. I was rarely mentioned in these celebratory speeches. I was the older brother, the one who skipped college, preferring to work with his hands. After high school, I saved money for years to open my own auto repair shop in town. It wasn't the most glamorous profession, but it was mine. I poured all my effort and energy into building it from the ground up. Regular customers knew me, trusted me, and relied on me. When someone's truck broke down, or a mom urgently needed her car fixed before the school week started, I was always there to help. To me, that meant a lot. To my family, unfortunately, it meant very little. My father constantly reminded me that fixing cars was a dead-end path. As a successful financial advisor, he believed success was measured by the number of zeros on a paycheck. He saw my auto shop more as a hobby than a serious career. I still remember one dinner when he declared, "Ethan, when are you going to get serious about your future? You can't spend your whole life covered in grease." I tried to remain calm, cutting my steak. "Dad, I employ people. I do my own accounting. I earn enough to support myself and help others. Isn't that serious enough?" He waved his hand dismissively. "It's not about enough, son. It's about ambition." Mom, sitting beside him, gently placed her hand on his. "Richard," she quietly said, "leave him be." She always tried to smooth things over, but never truly defended me. Her silence hurt even more than his words. Sam didn't make it easier either. She often made snide remarks, ridiculing the smell of oil from my shop or the stains on my clothes. I tried to ignore it, but sometimes her words stung more than hitting my thumb with a hammer. Something inside me twinged like a needle prick. Despite everything, I never stopped attending family gatherings. I convinced myself that Christmas, Thanksgiving, and birthdays weren't times for reproaches and grudges, but opportunities to be together, to feel a sense of unity. No matter how insignificant I felt within my childhood home, I still yearned to be part of that family, to feel connected to it. As Christmas approached, I decorated my modest apartment with a small tree. Its lights flickered unevenly, and the ornaments, inherited from childhood, held warm memories. I liked to imagine returning home after a family dinner, settling on the couch with a hot cocoa, and mentally reliving the evening's events. I always harbored a quiet hope that perhaps this time things would be different, that the atmosphere would be warmer and more welcoming. The truth was, I craved my father's approval more than anything. I dreamed of hearing him say, "I'm proud of you, Ethan." I wanted my mother to give me the same warm smile she gave Sam, and I hoped Sam, despite everything, would see me as a brother she respected, not a mistake she had to justify. My life outside the family wasn't empty or meaningless. In my shop, I was a significant figure. My employees, like Tony and Mark, treated me with respect, seeing me as a leader, not a failure. Clients thanked me for my honesty, fair prices, and human touch. This recognition meant a lot to me, but stepping through the threshold of my parents' home, I seemed to lose all my achievements. To them, I remained just a boy who never became the man they envisioned. That evening, when I called about Christmas dinner, I had just finished a long shift. My hands were rough from the cold, and my body ached from hours of working under the hood of an old pickup. Nevertheless, I smiled as I dialed my parents' number. I anticipated the taste of my mom's culinary masterpieces, my dad's loud laughter telling old stories, and even Sam's condescending glances at my jokes. I convinced myself that no matter how they saw me, I still had a right to be part of the holiday. When my father's firm, detached voice came through the receiver, I immediately sensed something was wrong. His abrupt and categorical tone didn't bode well for the warm invitation I had hoped for. When he stated that I wasn't welcome at the celebration, the fragile image of Christmas I had painted for myself shattered. This wasn't just an unwillingness to see me at one particular holiday, it was the culmination of years of criticism and dissatisfaction. It was proof that, despite all my efforts and achievements, I would never measure up to their high expectations. Hanging up the phone, I surveyed my apartment. The small Christmas tree continued to twinkle, but now it felt like a mockery. I sat on the couch, staring at the colorful lights, reflecting on every sacrifice I had made for my shop, every sleepless night, and every penny saved. I remembered the clients who called me reliable and the employees who respected me. And then I thought of my family, who had decided that all of that, and I myself, weren't enough to sit at the same table with them. That night, something inside me broke. For the first time, I stopped trying to make them see me differently, stopped hoping for their approval. Instead, I wondered what would happen if I stopped hiding my strength and achievements from them. I didn't know then that the chance to show them would come in just a few days. My father's call wouldn't leave my mind. Every word pressed heavily on my chest. He hadn't just forbidden me from coming to Christmas, he had declared that I wasn't welcome because of who I was, because of my job, because my sister was ashamed to be in the same room as me with her fiancé. I tried to shake off these thoughts. At the shop, I immersed myself in work, tinkering with engines, talking to clients, managing employees. Outwardly, I seemed calm and focused, but inside, a storm raged. Every time I tightened a bolt or wiped grease from my hands, I heard my father's words, "She doesn't want you there. Your job will humiliate her." My father feared that his son's work would tarnish his daughter's reputation in the eyes of her future fiancé. In my youth, I believed my father's strictness stemmed from a desire to see me succeed. However, with time, I realized that he sought not just my success, but success on his terms. He wanted my life to conform to specific standards rather than bring personal satisfaction. My sister met these expectations, for which she was rewarded with unconditional support. I, however, took a different path, and my father deemed me superfluous in his life. The attempt to call my mother and ask for her opinion never materialized. I knew she would express her love and desire to see me, but ultimately remind me to respect my father's wishes. Her love was never demonstrated through action. She never fought for me. And I, as painful as it was, couldn't bear that again. The night after the call, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the barely touched food. I felt like a 12-year-old boy again, standing in the yard while my father boasted to neighbors about Sam's successes, never once mentioning my own achievements. I remembered forcing myself to smile then, even as my chest burned with shame. That same burning sensation returned now with renewed intensity. A thought flashed through my mind, to go to their house, walk in, and prove I wasn't afraid. But what was the point? They didn't want to see me. I pictured Sam's face, sure to make a sarcastic remark about my clothes or the smell of motor oil. My father would frown, and my mother would fidget awkwardly, and I would sit at the table, knowing I had forced myself where I wasn't welcome. So I decided to stay silent and let them have their perfect holiday, convincing myself I didn't need it. But deep down, I felt an unbearable pain. Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It was the only time of year I felt like a child again, eagerly anticipating a family reunion. Now, I was being told there was no place for me in that family. 2 days later, Tony, one of my employees, came into the shop with paperwork. He was training a new assistant manager and needed my signature on the hiring documents. Looking at the name on the form, I felt my stomach clench. Lucas Hale. At first I thought it was a coincidence, but walking into the office and seeing him there, dressed in work boots and a shirt, I realized it was Sam's fiancé, the man next to whom I supposedly had no place at the Christmas table. Lucas looked up, and for a moment his face froze. He recognized me too. He tried to cover it with a smile, but I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Mr. Cole," he said, standing and extending his hand. "Thank you for the opportunity." I shook his hand firmly, saying in an even voice, "Welcome, Lucas." Inside, everything churned. The man who was supposed to sit at my parents' table as a symbol of success was now standing in my office, about to work under my direction. All day, I watched him carefully. Lucas was polite, perhaps even nervous, and worked diligently, but often avoided eye contact. I wondered if Sam knew, if my parents knew. I doubted it, because if they had, they would never have excluded me, fearing the truth. That night, lying awake in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I recalled my father's words again, but now they carried a different weight. My father said my job would humiliate my sister in front of her fiancé. But here was Sam's fiancé, working in my shop, in my uniform, taking orders from me. The humiliation my father so feared was already a reality they stubbornly ignored. They were so obsessed with appearances that they had blinded themselves to the truth. I faced a choice: stay silent and let Lucas play his part at Christmas dinner, allowing my family to continue thinking I wasn't good enough, or show up and open their eyes to the truth. For years I had swallowed my pride, bitten my tongue, and let them treat me like a second-class citizen. But that night, something changed. I decided to stop hiding and stop letting them define my worth. The conflict was no longer just between me and my family. It raged within me. I had to decide whether to remain the son who silently accepts rejection or become the man who would finally stand tall before them. Only one day remained until Christmas, and the decision I made would change everything. The moment I caught Lucas diligently working in my auto shop, I faced a dilemma that gnawed at me. I could have instantly fired him, demanded an explanation for why he chose to work for me while simultaneously planning to present himself to my family as a paragon of success. Yet, something held me back. Instead of a burst of anger, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt in a dominant position, and this was due not to backroom intrigues or lies, but to the truth itself. Lucas seemed profoundly uneasy in my presence. Every time our gazes met, he awkwardly looked away or found some task to busy himself with. He never once mentioned Sam, nor his engagement. His behavior betrayed a man carrying a heavy burden he desperately tried to conceal from prying eyes, and I decided to play along, observing his torment. I wanted Lucas to realize that the man his sister and father considered a failure was now his boss. However, as the Christmas holiday drew nearer, I faced a more significant question. Should I reveal the truth? Should I walk into my parents' home on Christmas and lay everything bare? The thought was incredibly tempting. I vividly imagined the shock on Sam's face, the silence that would fall over the room, and my father fumbling for words. It seemed deeply satisfying, yet at the same time, I feared that such an act would make me no different from them. That evening, after closing the shop, I shared my thoughts with Tony and Mark, two of my most loyal employees. They were cleaning up in the back room, preparing for the long holiday weekend, when Tony, looking intently at me, remarked, "You're quiet today. Something bothering you?" I hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell them the whole truth. I explained that Lucas, our new employee, was my sister's fiancé. I recounted how my parents had forbidden me from coming to Christmas because of my unprestigious job and how they considered Lucas too important to risk meeting him. Mark leaned back in his chair and shook his head sympathetically. "That's terrible, boss. Truly awful." Tony, crossing his arms, asked, "So what are you going to do? Let them keep treating you like that?" I, rubbing my hands, stared at the grease ingrained under my nails. "I don't know. Part of me wants to just let it go. The other part thinks I should walk in there and show them who I really am." Tony leaned forward. "Ethan, you built this place from the ground up. You provide us with steady work. You treat us like family and have never refused anyone here help. If they don't see your value, maybe it's time to stop hiding it." Their words deeply moved me. For years I had carried the burden of shame that wasn't mine. I had allowed my father's narrow view of success to define my self-worth. I had let my sister's snide remarks undermine my confidence. But now I realized that outside my parents' home, I was no failure. I was a leader, a man who had built something lasting and meaningful. The decision became crystal clear. I wouldn't pick a fight with Lucas at the shop. I wasn't going to embarrass him, because it wasn't about Lucas. It was about myself and my family. I would reveal the truth where it mattered most, in their home on Christmas, at the table where they believed I didn't deserve to sit. On Christmas Eve, I stayed late at the shop, meticulously ensuring everything was impeccably clean. The air carried the scent of motor oil and fresh rubber, but also a fragrance of pride. I walked along the repair bays, running my hand over the hood of a freshly serviced car, and thought about how this place embodied years of sacrifice and hard work. My father could never take that from me. My sister could never erase it with her insults. As I locked up the shop, I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't experienced in a long time. The fear of rejection was still there, but it no longer controlled me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to play the role of the quiet son who meekly nodded and said, "I understand." I was going to walk into that house with my head held high. On Christmas morning, I put on clean, ironed, and neat clothes, but I didn't try to appear as someone I wasn't. I wore what I always wore when I wanted to present myself with pride: dark jeans, a button-down shirt, and my work jacket with my name embroidered on the chest. I wasn't hiding my identity, I was embracing it. Before leaving, I looked in the mirror and told myself, "You don't need their approval. You just need the truth to come out." The tension reached its peak, and then I appeared. As my truck's wheels crunched on the gravel driveway of my parents' house, a line of cars hugged the street's edge. Right in front of me, like a precious gem, gleamed Sam's car, its flawless appearance her calling card. For a moment, I froze, gripping the steering wheel, feeling my heart pound wildly in my chest. The thought of fleeing flashed through my mind, but then years of silence, years of being told I wasn't good enough, resurfaced. "Enough," I told myself. Stepping out of the truck, I walked purposefully towards the door and knocked. My mother opened the door, her face a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. "Ethan, we weren't expecting you," she said. I smiled gently in return. "I know, Mom, but I think it's time I shared Christmas with you all." She hesitated, torn between maternal love and fear of what was to come, but eventually stepped aside, letting me in. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I heard Sam's ringing laughter from the dining room. My father's deep voice came from the living room, and then I saw Lucas, proudly seated at the table. Lucas froze when our eyes met. At that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I had walked into the very den of rejection, not to beg for forgiveness, but to show them who I truly was and how long they had ignored me. When I entered the dining room, all eyes turned to me, and the clinking of cutlery and muffled hum of conversations instantly ceased. My father, seated at the head of the table, tensed like a spring at the sight of me. My mother looked bewildered, her hands nervously fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. Sam leaned back in her chair, her smile gone, her eyes narrowed with irritation. And then Lucas. At first he held himself upright, trying to maintain composure, but as our gazes met, his confidence wavered. The hand holding his wine glass trembled slightly before he placed it back on the table. "Ethan," my father cut in, his voice full of authority, "what are you doing here?" I stepped forward slowly, maintaining a calm tone. "You did, Dad. You said I wasn't welcome here because Sam didn't want to see me. You said my job would humiliate her in front of her fiancé." An ominous silence fell over the room. My words hung in the air like thick smoke that no one could dispel. My father's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Sam spoke first. "You shouldn't have come," she said coldly. "This is an important evening for us. Lucas is meeting the family, and we don't need you bringing your dirty world in here." I looked at her, then shifted my gaze to Lucas. "Dirty world, you say? Funny, because your precious fiancé has spent the last week working in it, under my supervision." The room was stunned into silence. My father blinked in surprise, and my mother gasped. Sam let out a short laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I turned to face Lucas. "Are you going to explain, or should I?" Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it. His face had gone as pale as a sheet. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but distinct. "It's true. I've been working at Ethan's shop. I lost my job a month ago and didn't tell anyone. I needed work, and he hired me." Lucas's confession hit the gathering like a clap of thunder. My father's face reddened, and his fingers gripped his fork until his knuckles turned white. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting between Lucas and me. Sam stared at Lucas as if he had committed the most terrible betrayal. You work for him," she hissed. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Because I knew how you'd react. You've made it clear what you think of Ethan and his work. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd stop respecting me." Sam's voice rose in anger. "Of course I would. You were supposed to be someone important, someone who could provide me with the life I deserve, not some pathetic mechanic." At that moment, I felt I could no longer remain silent. I stepped forward, my voice firm and steady. "Enough, Sam. You talk about me like I'm the lowest of the low, but the truth is, my employees respect me more than you ever will. My clients trust me. I built something real, something that helps people every day. And while you were chasing the illusion of a glamorous life, your fiancé was standing in my shop, learning a simple truth. A person's dignity isn't defined by a job title on a business card, but by honest work." In the tense atmosphere of the family dinner, a storm erupted. Tired of years of neglect, I unleashed a truth upon my relatives that turned their world upside down. "The man you admire so much, Father, is on my payroll," I declared, highlighting the absurdity of a situation where my own accomplishments remained unnoticed. In the ensuing silence, my father tried to object, but the words caught in his throat. A momentary flicker of confusion crossed his face, as if the realization of the truth had pierced his armor of pride. My mother, as if afraid to break the fragile balance, quietly asked if it was true. I confirmed every word, emphasizing that my subordinate, the object of my father's admiration, had always received the respect I myself had never gotten from my own family. Lucas, unable to bear the tension, admitted the fairness of my words. In response, Sam, her face contorted with rage, accused Lucas of deceit. But Lucas, tired of the lies and hypocrisy, countered that she was the one who preferred illusions to the truth. My mother, realizing the depth of her mistake, tearfully asked for forgiveness. Taking a deep breath, I felt that for the first time in my life I stood in that house without feeling inferior. I was no longer a disappointment, a failure. I was a man who had built himself, and now my family was forced to acknowledge it. "Family shouldn't measure love by job titles," I declared, sweeping my gaze across their faces. "If I am unworthy to sit at this table as a son and a brother, I will leave as a man who knows his own worth." A heavy silence settled in the room. My father stared at his plate as if searching for answers there. My mother, with a trembling hand, tried to hold me back but couldn't find the right words. My sister glared at Lucas, who, head bowed, avoided everyone's eyes. I left the table, leaving my relatives alone with their thoughts. I no longer needed their approval. Their opinion no longer held power over me. "Thank you for the invitation," I said, heading for the exit, "but I won't be staying for dinner." A semblance of regret flickered in my father's eyes, but pride prevented him from uttering words of reconciliation. My mother pleaded with me to stay but couldn't stop me. As I left, I heard my sister lash out at Lucas, accusing him of humiliating her in front of the family. Lucas unexpectedly responded calmly, stating that honest work could not be humiliating, and if she considered herself too good for it, then perhaps she was too good for him. Stepping outside, I breathed in the crisp air of freedom. Inside the house, passions raged, but outside, there was clarity. I had spoken the truth, and it had been heard. Whether my father and sister would ever acknowledge me no longer mattered. I knew who I was. I understood my true self and my life's path. Returning to my truck, my phone vibrated, signaling a message from Tony. The simple message read, "Merry Christmas, boss. Thanks for everything you do for us." This unassuming phrase brought a genuine smile to my face. For the first time in days, a sense of calm settled in my soul. While my family might never recognize my contributions, the colleagues working alongside me every day appreciated my efforts. They trusted me and believed in the work to which I had dedicated my life. That evening, instead of being alone in my apartment, I invited Tony, Mark, and a few other guys from the shop over. Ordering takeout, they spread it out on paper plates and gathered around my modest Christmas tree. Amidst laughter and shared stories, Christmas, for the first time in years, felt truly authentic, not as a display of outward polish and status, but as a gathering with kindred spirits. Later, as night brought silence and the tree light softly illuminated the room, my father's words came back to me. He believed that the job would humiliate Sam in front of her fiancé. However, in reality, this work had revealed the true nature of Sam and her chosen one, rather than my own. Labor is not humiliation. It is dignity, sacrifice, discipline, and pride. If they are unable to see this, then their blindness is their problem. That Christmas, I learned an important truth. The family whose approval I had sought my entire life might never give me what I desired. But that was no reason for loneliness. The family I had built with my own hands, founded on loyalty, respect, and shared aspirations, was what truly mattered. Turning off the lights and immersing myself in the twinkling Christmas tree lights, I whispered to myself, "I am good enough." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. This Christmas had taught me a lesson I would never forget. Respect isn't defined by a job title, clothes, or a house. It is born from how you treat people. My family might never fully understand this, but I did. And now I knew that the people who genuinely cared about me, those who stood by me, were my real family.